Gail Saunders here with Braxton Howard, talking the path to 53. Now we're hitting up the defensive line, a big part of the Eagles' success last season. They were really bringing the thunder. But first and foremost, how are you doing today, Braxton?
I'm doing good, Gail. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. A little congested, man. These allergies, man, they're like Fletcher Cox, man. Right on top of my neck. It's crazy. Speaking of Fletcher Cox, uh, that pressure he was bringing through the interior, Brandon Graham off the edge, Chris Long off the bench, Curry holding it down, coming back from an injury the previous season, adding Timmy Jernigan, Bo Allen off the bench, the rookie Derek Barnett handling business, even in the Super Bowl. That defensive line group was tremendous. And you think about where the Eagles spent a lot of their money last season was in the trenches, and it obviously showed. I think the defensive line was a big part of this Eagles this season. I mean, everywhere you looked, everyone was talking about how dominant this defensive line was, and it was no lie because they were super dominant. But I mean, how did you feel about this Eagles group last season?
I think that the Eagles' defensive line last season is probably the reason that they won the Super Bowl. I
Right.
think, and basically all year, just their success. I think that it was the defensive line was probably the core, probably the best position group on the team. You know, they were deep. They they never ran out of gas. They kept coming. The rotation was great. I think that this year, losing Curry and Allen is going to be tough, but adding Bennett will definitely level it out. And I think that barring all injuries, they could do the same thing this year.
You talked about that rotation, which was key. You talking about keeping guys fresh. I mean, if you look at the snap percentages, Brandon Graham led the group 65%. Curry had 56% of the snaps. Those are the defensive ends. And then you had Fletcher Cox and Timmy Jernigan. Fletcher Cox had 59% of the snaps. Jernigan, 48%. Chris Long, 48%. Um, Barnett had 41% of the snaps. Allen had 41% of the snaps. Destiny Vile had 22% of the snaps. Qualls 10%. That means 5%. So if you're looking at the snap percentage, you look at Vinny Curry, 56% of the snaps last season. And let's see, Bo Allen, 41% of the snaps last season. And Jernigan, out, out with injury. We still don't know how he got injured, but we know he got injured, and he'll be out for a while. That's a lot of production, a lot of snaps that are missing heading into the season. But we did add some pieces in Michael Bennett and Haloti Nada. So moving forward into 2018, we'll look at the defensive end group. I mean, how are you feeling about Brandon Graham heading into the 2018 season?
I think Brandon Graham's probably going to be again probably one of the best defensive linemen in the league. I think between him and Fletcher Cox, I think that they kind of run this group. They kind of it's their group. I think just the way that he performed last season on the outside and on the inside, I think that his versatility within the defensive line is going to be huge, and I think that he'll probably him and Fletcher Cox will lead this group to where they want to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think Brandon Graham, his leadership, I think his ability to get to the quarterback. You think had 9.5 sacks last year, led the group. He also did a good job with forced fumbles, had two forced fumbles. I think what you like from Brandon Graham is he's been there and done that. He's overcome adversity as a younger player, going through injury, and now coming into his later years. He's 30 years old. Finally got a Super Bowl ring. I think now it's we got to see if the Eagles reward him for being the, you know, saving the day for the Eagles, knocking that ball out of Tom Brady's hand. Do they reward him? Are you all for giving Brandon Graham that money?
I think that I would give him the money right now because you know, I mean, defensive ends. Every great Super Bowl team has had pretty much a dominant defensive end. It's key. It's probably the like most key position on a defense, and I think that you need that pressure. And you know, guys like Brandon Graham don't grow on trees, so I think that I would pay him the money right now and see how he does, see where it takes you.
All right, okay. Another guy that they brought into the mix to hold down the fort, as Curry is gone. Michael Bennett from the Seattle Seahawks, dealing with like a little legal issue. It's still kind of shady in the way it all went down. I think it's not going to be. I don't think it's going to affect his time here in Philadelphia. Your feelings about Michael Bennett, bringing him into this roster and this D line rotation?
Man, it's huge. I mean, you know, you lose Curry, who had 18 quarterback hurries. You lose Bo Allen, who had 4 quarterback hurries. But then you add Michael Bennett, who had 24 quarterback hurries. He's one of those guys. He's a lot like Brandon Graham. You know, he can do some work inside as well as outside his true position. He's just one of those, and just for what the Eagles got him for, it was just a complete steal. You know,
Right.
bigger than any guy that they drafted. Honestly, I think that you know, barring all the legal issues and whatnot, I think that he'll make a gigantic impact this year. And I think you know, seeing him, Fletcher Cox, and Brandon Graham on the same offensive line or same defensive line, that's
Scary.
not what an offensive line wants to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think Michael Bennett. I think he adds an edge to the group. I think if you think about the lineman as a whole, the defensive lineman, he's got that edge, and he'll definitely try to get in the minds of some of these offensive linemen, and then also prior to this, we were also talking about like the speed package, which could be pretty sick. His ability to move inside, maybe with Journey get out, maybe he'll get some more snaps on the inside, perhaps, or being part of that rotation a little bit more. But moving forward, Derek Barnett. How are you feeling about Derek Barnett?
I was really glad when the Eagles drafted him. He was a steal. He outplayed Miles Garrett his whole SEC career, and he proved last year that he was very worthy of the first round pick. I think you know, his snap percentage was at 41%. I think that number is going to increase. You know, 41% of snaps, having 5 sacks. You know, as a rookie, not too shabby. So yeah, I think that he'll improve his snap percentages. He'll get in there more, and he'll make a good impact.
Yeah, I think about the production that he had from his freshman year on. He was super productive, breaking Reggie White's sack record, and then actually being there at the draft, in the upfront, with all the other fans when that pick went through, and some fans weren't that pleased. But I had to talk some fans off the ledge. I'm like, yo, Barnett, Barnett is gonna be. He's a quality player. The thing I loved about Barnett coming out of the draft is his technique. Like for a rookie, I thought his technique was off the chain. I'm like, all right, he's got some moves. He's not like a one trick pony. And then he has that bend that not all players, not all defensive uh, ends their bend are created equal. Some players can get low, and that's what you like with Barnett. He came through, man. Like he had what 5 sacks. I predicted he would have 8 sacks last year, and he missed a couple. He missed like 3 or so,
Yeah.
but he definitely was productive. Did he had a touchdown? Didn't he?
Yeah.
Was that
Against the Rams,
the Raider? Was it the Raiders game?
was it the it was the Raiders game? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think Brandon Graham had the touchdown against the Rams,
against
I
the
believe.
Rams. Right.
But I think Derek Barnett really showed out, and I think I think the Eagles saw this coming down the pipe with Vinny Curry's contract. They knew they couldn't afford to bring they were in limbo for a second with trying to figure out if they could get him to take a pay cut. That didn't work. Obviously, you want to see Curry get his money. Obviously, the time is short for a player to make money in his career. So I think Derek Barnett is going to get his time to shine. So I'm impressed. I'm impressed what I saw last season. But following him, the savvy veteran in Chris Long. How do you feel about Chris Long going into the 2018 season?
I think Chris Long's a vital piece to the defensive line. You know, just his veteran leadership. It's a lot like Brandon Graham's and Fletcher Cox, and I think his production off the bench. I know he's getting older, but he's still bringing it. He brought it last season. I think that he'll continue bringing it. His snap percentages might go down a little bit. We'll see, but I think that his production will be there for sure.
Yeah, and I'm looking at he had 32 tackles. He had 5 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, and QB pressures and plus the hits. He had around 38. And I think for the money they gave him last season and the production that he brought to the table was crazy. I think you know having that savvy veteran in the locker room to provide leadership, a guy who played with the Patriots, won a Super Bowl, now played with the Eagles, won a Super Bowl. I remember talking to Elijah Qualls when he was at one of the Fourth and John tailgates. I said, "Who's the one guy on the Eagles roster? Um, that like who's the funniest dude?" He's like, "Chris Long by far is the funniest guy on the team. He keeps everyone like even keeled." Um, and that kind of stuck with me how he kind of talked about Chris Long and what he meant to the defensive line group. But yeah, I mean, I think if they can get the same production out of Chris Long next season, that would be amazing. But moving down the line, a guy who's been here for a little bit, he's been backing up these guys for a couple years. Stephen Means.
I think Steven Means is a good player. I don't know, just with the defensive ends that you got, you got Bennett, you got Graham, Barnett, Long. It's still kind of hard for him to get his
Yeah.
snaps, but I mean he's pretty productive once you put him in there. I think that now that he's been here for a little while, I think that the coaches are probably leaning towards they're getting more comfortable with putting him in situations, like that. So I think it'll be interesting to see how many like valuable minutes he plays. But if any of those four guys get injured, he's gonna be called upon to
And you
replace him.
think he's 28 years old. His cap hit for the season's 955,000. Um, you know, he did log a sack last season. I think you mentioned about the guys ahead of him. It's really tough to get some playing time with those kind of quality guys in front of you. So Steven Means he's a good depth player. I know a lot of people would like to see him get more snaps just to see what he can do. But another guy that the Eagles added into the mix in the fourth round of the draft, they went with Florida State's Josh Sweat. How are you feeling about Sweat?
I think Josh Sweat can make a big impact. I mean, he's dealt with some injuries in the past, but when you look at him, he's one of those guys. He's physically opposing. Like when you see him, I think that
Right.
he looks the part. Uh, like we were talking about before we got on here, he was kind of played out of position at Florida State. I think that now, the Eagles are going to know what to do with him. Jim Schwartz is going to know what to do with him. So I think that he could, you know, make a big impact this year. Maybe not this year with, the four people ahead of him, but definitely when you have those type of guys, when you have Chris Long, Brandon Graham, Michael Bennett, when you have those guys ahead of you, it's sure a whole lot easier to learn.
Yeah, I think bringing in another rotational pass rusher. If you look at the age of the guys that we have in the house, Graham's 30. Let's see, Michael Bennett's 32. He'll be 33 during the season. You think about a guy who can, he's coming off. He was playing out of position at Florida State. Everybody knows the story that he's basically wrecked his knee in high school. Almost had to amputate his knee. Um, Doctor said that he might not ever play football again. He was obsessed with rehabbing. He came back, rebounded. They actually had to tell his parents to tell him to stop rehabbing because he's in the gym so much. The coaches were concerned about if he was going to hurt himself. He didn't. He didn't redshirt his freshman year. He's like, I'm going to play. I don't care. Like he missed his, I believe, missed his senior year. I think he got hurt his junior year. So he's very obsessed. He was a captain his senior year at Florida State, and very determined guy. Like I think the one thing he talked about is he's finally going to be able to do what he's loves to do, and that's rush the quarterback. He's not. They had him playing four tech in front of head on in front of the tackles, offensive tackles. Now he's going to be on the attack in nine, coming off the edge. He's got a long frame. Let's hope. Hopefully, he can get to use that frame. But you put him in a locker room with like ridiculous pass rushers who have. Imagine being a fly on the wall or being a rookie and just absorbing all the technique you're learning from Brandon Graham, Michael Bennett, Chris Long. I mean, even Derek Barnett. Just seeing people work. You give this guy a couple. He's gonna have to learn some pass rush moves, get a little bit stronger, but he's got the size and length, athleticism you like off a guy coming off the edge, and plus he's just maybe a rotational guy. We're not asking much from him. So moving down the line, bottoming out the back end of the defensive end group, we have Joe Osman and Danny Achukwu. Any of those guys you think have an opportunity to affect the roster?
I think Joe Osman could make the roster. From everything I've seen, that he's just one of those workhorse guys.
Yeah.
Never going to miss a day in the gym. He's always going to try and get better. Always going to give it his all. But he's not the ideal like athletically agility type guy that you want at defensive end. But the NFL projected him to be drafted in rounds 5 or 6 for a reason. Over his last 2 years, he had 21 sacks. He forced 8 fumbles. I think that he's one of those guys that's not going to just like come in and just make an immediate impact. But I think that he could definitely make the team, make the practice squad, or something of that nature.
At the back end of the roster, like these UDFA's, they always bring in guys that have those kind of leadership skills, and with some production. He was a team captain, his team as well. But just it's going to be tough. You think practice squad when you talk about those guys. Shatu's been on the practice squad for a while, trying to get some snaps. It's very tough with this defensive line. It's stacked. I'm not sure about Danny Ezechukwa. I don't know if he's gonna. To me, it sounds like just a guy to me. Um, but he could try to make the roster. That's at the end of the day, it's about bringing in competition. But talk about the middle of this defense. Fletcher Cox holds down the fort. He's a true beast in every sense of the word. He said, some people don't really, they don't realize what a defensive tackle having a guy like him, the center, draws the attention from everybody else. You think sometimes he beats double teams. Sometimes if you leave him alone by himself, he's going to wreak havoc. And the quickest way to the quarterback is at the defensive tackle position. You can ask any quarterback what Fletcher Cox brings to the table, and everyone will rave about what he brings to the table. There might be some Eagle fan out there who might be upset about the OTAs from last year. But your feelings about Fletcher Cox and the Eagles defense in 2018?
I mean, just like you said, I mean, he's a beast. He runs the middle. I would personally, I think that he's second to probably only Aaron Donald. In my opinion, I think that he's so good at what he does in the playoffs. It's like he almost hit even another level in the playoffs. I mean, the Falcons game, he was unbelievable.
Yeah.
I think that he's just going to do what he does, and I think when you look at Fletcher Cox on the depth chart, you're not really worried about, like, what he's going to bring. So
Yeah, and he can run for touchdowns, like the Washington Redskins game when they I guess they moved him out to, or was that a stunt where he was on the outside? He took advantage of that offensive tackle. What was that, Moses, I believe? And put in some work, man. Missing from the group, Timmy Jernigan. It's a big loss, man. That's a guy who's playing injured last season. Some people were like, "Oh, maybe that injury was the injury that he sustained during the season," but we still don't know. And they're kind of like Doug Peterson's being weird about it, so it's making us feel weird about it. If he would have just said like, he got injured working out," we would have been like, "All right, cool." But we still want to know. But your feelings about Tim Jernigan?
I don't know, man. It's weird. It's definitely it's a huge loss because I mean the inside's not as deep as the outside of the defensive line, but I think adding Halati Nada, that's a
Yep.
good add. I think Elijah Qualls and Destiny Bayal, they're gonna have to. That's gonna be probably the position battle to watch, because we really don't know much about Jernigan's injury, but they're definitely gonna have to step up, and I think it'll be good if he rehabs well and whatever's going on, if he gets back, just in time for the playoffs, it'll be good to have him for that last half of the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I hope we get him back. He's a disruptor, and I think last season. Let's see, he had two and a half sacks last season, 34 tackles, um, 9 tackles for loss. I mean that's something that sticks out. But 48% of the snaps last season, and 41% of the snaps by Bo Allen. Those two guys missing in the middle. Haloti Nada, you got to hopefully think that he can stay healthy because he dealt with injuries too. But
Mm-hmm.
your feelings on the big man, the savvy veteran Haloti Nada?
I think now with Jernigan, I mean the Eagles might have known something that we didn't.
Right.
That it was key to bring him in, especially now with Jernigan's injury. I think that you're really gonna might have to ask him for more than what he signed up for. After all, this year.
Yeah, I think Haloti Nada, he brings a kind of presence. There's not too many guys that are built like him. He's a wide body. Like it makes it easier for linebackers when you have a guy like Haloti Nada up front. So I'm sure all the linebacking group is excited to see a guy like that take over the middle. He was asked to kind of be like a rotational guy. I think, now we're gonna say, hey, dude, we're gonna need a little bit more from you. I mean, if you look at the way the cap is broke out for the season, he's making 2.725 million for the season. And then you look down behind him, uh, you got Destiny Vio, making 632,000. Could he be the next guy on the depth chart to push for snaps, or do you believe Elijah Qualls? That some others feel like Elijah Qualls might get an opportunity to shine.
I think that they'll both probably get their chance with Jernigan's injury. I think that you're gonna really need both of them, and you hope that they both just kind of take it as like we both got to work, like not really like cause any tension between them. And I think that they're both good players. I'll probably give the edge to Qualls. I think I
Okay.
think Qualls could take it over, but like I said, I mean you're gonna need both of them this year, especially for the first part with
Uh,
whatever Jernigan's got going on.
Another thing that stuck out to me when Elijah Qual showed up to the tailgate. I'm telling you how random it is that a NFL player shows up unannounced to the Fourth of John tailgate, and you're like, dude, like you don't get many opportunities to like just kick it and talk to a player. So one of the things I talked to Elijah about, I'm like, dude, like how strong is Fletcher Cox? Like he's like, dude, that dude is like country strong. Like he is so like he plays with offensive linemen. Like he throws people out of the way. And he talked about how stacked the defensive line group was. Like he was talking about how good Jernigan was, and he's like, "Yo, man, it's so hard to get on this roster." He was when he talked to me about when there was like cuts. He was kind of thinking that he had an opportunity to get cut, and he was not that he wanted to be cut, but he was like, my only um, opportunity to play is if I go somewhere else and start somewhere else because he felt he was that confident about his skill set. He's like, I could go start for other teams today, but on this roster, it's hard for me to get any snaps. And obviously it's with those guys up front, it's understandable. But this year, it's Qualls or die, and I think Destiny Viles, he's been a guy who he got 22% of the snaps last year. He's had opportunities, but it's gonna be. I think that's a battle to watch. But before the podcast, we were talking about some of these players, going over some of the players. A guy that you were a big fan of a little bit, huh? Bruce Hector. Your feelings are Bruce Hector.
I like Bruce Hector. I think that he's going to surprise a lot of people. I think that he could move up in that rotation for sure. I think that he could become, third string and work his way. I think an impressive stat that I saw was his last two seasons, no missed or broken tackles, and that's what you want. So whenever he gets there, it's pretty much a wrap. And I think the reason he went undrafted was his size, 6'2",
Yeah,
296, not very
right.
optimal for an inside, but he put in work at South Florida, and I think if he can translate his game, I think that he could cause some issues, especially those smaller guys on the inside. They
Yeah.
they work out pretty well, with their speed. They're faster than a normal defense tackle, but we'll see. But as of right now, like I really like Bruce Hector. I think that he can make
And
it.
I and I think he's this is the 4-3 defense is great for his skill set. I think one impressive thing that he had in 2017 he had 7 sacks and 13 tackles for loss. I mean, if you're talking about your interior guys getting 7 sacks, and that kind of those tackles for loss kind of makes you think like, all right, this guy can get in there and cause some havoc. And he's in a one gapping style defense. All you have to do is get upfield, man, hold your own.
Yeah, well now
But
you see more of those like Brandon Graham, Michael Bennett getting time inside. They're not as big, but they put in work on the inside, and I think the game is kind of changing in that sense where these smaller defensive tackles can start and do work, especially if you're alongside a guy like Fletcher Cox. Like
right,
I feel like if you were to put Bruce Hector in if you're on a defense line with Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, and Michael Bennett, you're probably going to do pretty good because just I think the Eagles defense could make him a lot better than what he might actually be.
I mean, the last guy that we had on the list was Winston Craig, who could be, he's been on the practice squad for a little bit. I think at this point he's more just a body right now,
Yeah,
a camp body.
yeah.
I think how the Eagles were actually they looked at Courtney Upshaw. The Eagles were looking at.
Hmm.
So if they're working out other guys, they might not be as
Yeah.
sold on who the guys on the back of the end of the roster are. And the Eagles also were heard to be kicking the kicking the tires on a former player in Cedric Thornton. Played defensive end in that 3-4 for Chip Kelly, then went over to the Dallas Cowboys, our arch rivals. But if you bring in Cedric, he can give us some secrets. Maybe they just brought him in just to hear the secrets of the Cowboys. Not that they
Maybe
need it
so.
anyway. You know what I mean? But overall, I think we did a pretty good job going through the group. Any last words or anything you want to hammer home?
No, I think that I think barring barring the injuries, all that, I think the defensive line could probably be the core of the defense again this season. I'm
Right.
excited to see how they play with Michael Bennett. Now I think Derek Barnett's second year. I think it'll be fun to watch for sure.
Yeah, I think that the one thing that I'm interested in seeing the growth in Barnett. I like the idea of him getting more snaps. I like the idea of what this speed package could be like with, uh, you know, I mean, imagine Graham. I mean, either or, like Haloti Nada, Fletcher Cox, Curry. I mean, not Curry. Bennett on the outside, Graham on the outside. That's crazy. When Jernigan comes back, either or, it's going to be the rotation is sick. And I think I've said it last season. I said, imagine being a rookie or like first year player or second year player, or having like a scrub offensive lineman trying to block those kind of defensive ends with like by the time by the time you're a 30-year-old defensive end in the NFL, how many signature moves do you have?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Now you gotta face Derek Barnett with multiple, Brandon Graham with multiple, Michael Bennett with multiple moves. I mean, and then you get hit with some raw athleticism, maybe, or from Josh Sweat. Like you got to memorize. I mean, that's the one thing that's is great about having a deep defensive line is offensive lineman is he could be lost out there if he's a young guy. I mean,
yeah,
that's the thing. When it comes fourth quarter, and Brandon Graham is breathing down your neck and trying to make that stop to end the Super Bowl, that's what kind of things can happen. And you have a rookie who's always rushing to the ball and around the ball, and Derek Barnett get to the ball. I mean, I could go on, but the defensive line is going to be a big part of our group in 2018 again. But that's all for me and Braxton. Braxton, where can they find you on Twitter?
at Brackshot, BRAQ shot.
And you can find me on Twitter at Eagle Sessions. For Braxton and me, that's all for us, and we'll see you guys soon.